Handheld video game systems. Just about the coolest thing in the world, right? Like, who said, hey, like at home, how you have to, sit in front of a TV and play? Well, why don't we make this? Why don't we make a portable gaming device that has a screen built into it and just allows you to, you can play anytime you want to as long as you have batteries or whatever. I mean, it was an amazing invention, and there's so many, handheld video game consoles that came out, and it wasn't until the Game Boy came out that it really revolutionized handheld gaming devices. Before that time, handhelds were cool, but it didn't really hit the market hard. But there's a console, a handheld system, that it actually just had its 20-year anniversary last month on April the 26th. And I know it's not April anymore, and that already happened, but I feel like it'd be a disservice not to talk about this system. So that's why I want to have an observed anniversary celebration. This system is Sega's Game Gear. The Game Gear was a system that was made to directly compete against the Game Boy. And, well, if you guys, I'm sure most of you have not heard of it, so it's pretty easy to say that it failed. It didn't get the recognition that it wanted here in America. So for this video, I just wanted to show you guys kind of like a history of the Game Gear and actually give some of my own stories on it, because I actually never owned a Game Boy. I wanted a Game Boy. My parents got me a Game Gear instead. And so I was one of the very few kids that had a Game Gear back in the day, like 20 years ago, and I played that like crazy, but I never actually had the Game Boy that everyone I know had. So anyway, here is the history of the Game Gear.
Nintendo and Sega, two gaming giants that fought it out in the 80s and the 90s, and even in the handheld markets. With the release of the Game Boy, Sega knew they had to do something to enter into the handheld market. So that's when they went ahead and decided to create the Sega Game Gear. Released on April 26, 1991, for $150, the Sega Game Gear came with a pack-in title called Columns, which was, for all intents and purposes, a Tetris ripoff, but still managed to make the system very appealing. Now, with all video game systems, even handhelds, there were some pros and cons to the Sega Game Gear. One pro was the ability to display color graphics, something the Game Boy couldn't do, and also having an, in general, more advanced graphics engine. I mean, compare this screenshot of Sonic the Hedgehog to this screenshot of Super Mario Land on the Game Boy. The difference is as clear as night and day. I mentioned earlier that the Game Gear was advanced, and it really was, and had so much potential that it never got to show. Did you know that if you bought an accessory and attached it to the top of the Game Gear, you could actually watch TV on it? That's amazing for its time. Now, to talk about some cons, there are a couple of things Sega didn't get right. For one were the games. A lot of the games were just downsized versions of really popular Sega Genesis games, and Sega never really tried to release a lot of exclusives for the Game Gear. Another thing was the size of the system. It's a portable gaming device. Look at this comparison photo of the Game Gear next to the PSP. That thing is huge! I mean, I know the Game Boy was kind of big, but that is ridiculous! Another thing, and I think it's the worst thing about the Game Gear, was the batteries. This beast took 6 AA batteries. Can you imagine having to go on a road trip and stocking up on 12 batteries just in case these die? And they died really quick from what I've heard. So to kind of give a little conclusion here, the Game Gear was a really good attempt by Sega to try to beat out the Game Boy. It had really good graphics, it had potential to do so much more had it lasted longer, but the fact that the Game Boy had a head start and just had a better library of exclusive games, even if they were downgrading graphics, just gave Nintendo the advantage that Sega didn't have. It would be years until another company, being Sony, would come out and try to compete against Nintendo portables. So Sega gave it its best shot and was the first.
So as you saw, the Game Gear had a pretty bad kind of history. But before I end this video, I wanted to tell you guys a story about my experiences with the Game Gear. It's actually kind of funny. So I would wait by the car riders area. And the car riders area was basically for people who rode back home in a car. Their mom or dad picked them up. They would wait in like this little area until like their parents or whoever was picking them up came to get them. So there I was sitting there, I was waiting, you know, sitting around for all the kids talking, and I noticed this kid playing like this handheld device. So I walked up to the kid and I'm like, man, what is that? And he's like, oh, it's the Game Boy. And I'm like, Game Boy? What is that? And he's like, oh, well, it's kind of like the Nintendo, except it's portable. And I was like, that is awesome. And I told my parents, hey, what I want for Christmas is a Game Boy with the game Kirby. Kirby's Dream Land. That's what I told them. And they're like, yeah, sure, Kirby, whatever. And then they ended up getting me for Christmas a Game Gear with, I think it came with the game Sonic the Hedgehog 2. And they never told me, like I asked them the other day in preparation for filming this video, like, why'd you guys get me that so I can say the story? And they didn't remember. They honestly did not know. They're like, we did that? We didn't get what you wanted? I'm like, yeah, like they forgot the story. I always thought they went to like a Toys R Us or something like that, and they asked for a Game Boy, and the Game Gear had just came out, and I bet you anything the store employee was like, oh, the Game Gear is so much cooler. It's in color, and look, Sonic's in it. And they knew that I liked Sonic, because the last thing they had bought me, the last video game system, was Sega Genesis, which had Sonic in it. So they probably thought, oh, man, he probably loves that Game Boy, but he's gonna love the Game Gear. It has Sonic in it, and it's in color, and it's way better. To make a long story short, I ended up not liking it, and pretty much, I don't think, I might have bought like 5 games for it, and then I just stopped buying for it, because I didn't care, and then it died by the time I really didn't care, and they didn't make any more games with it. Meanwhile, the Game Boy, that thing was released in 1989, and they were still making games for it, like, God, in like the mid 90s or something. It was crazy. It almost had a 10-year lifespan. It was really nuts. I'm bothered that I'll never know why my parents got me a Game Gear instead. I never will.